The echo of steel and silence as morning sunlight slipped through cracks in the ancient stone tower, painting the room in golden slashes of light and dust. Birds chirped softly in the distance. But inside the cold stone chamber, there was only stillness and a man gasping for breath. He sat up suddenly, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. His hands trembled, reaching for something familiar, his phone, his glasses. But what he touched instead was rough straw, the stiff fibers scratching his skin. Confused, he looked around. The room was strange. The walls were stone, cold and gray. The ceiling was low and made of thick wooden beams, blackened with age and soot. The bed wasn't a bed, it was a pile of hay covered with a thin, scratchy wool blanket. The air smelled of iron, smoke, and something old, like dried blood and forgotten time. He blinked. He was fully clothed, but not in pajamas or jeans. A thick linen shirt clung to his chest. His legs were wrapped in rough wool trousers. Leather boots covered his feet, and at his side lay a sword. He stared at it, not daring to move. The sword looked real, far too real. The steel blade was worn, but sharp. The handle was wrapped in leather, smooth from years of use. There was something noble about it, something terrifying too. He finally stood up, wobbling on legs that felt both strong and unfamiliar. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a polished bronze plate hanging on the wall. It wasn't his face, or at least, not exactly. The man, staring back, had deep-set eyes, a short beard, a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. He looked hardened, weathered, and much older than the 28-year-old office worker who fell asleep in his one-bedroom apartment after binge-watching a medieval documentary. "What is this?" he whispered aloud. His voice was deeper, hoarser, like someone who had seen too much and spoken too little. He opened the wooden door to the room. It creaked loudly on rusted iron hinges. Outside was a narrow stone hallway lit by torchlight. He stepped forward, every movement echoing off the walls. His boots thudded with weight, and the hallway smelled of damp stone and sweat. He climbed the spiraling stairs slowly. Each step sent jolts of fear and wonder through him. He reached the top, pushed open another door, and stepped into daylight. The courtyard below buzzed with life. Men in chainmail sparred with wooden swords. Stable boys brushed horses. A cook shouted orders near an open fire pit. None of them noticed him until one older man looked up, eyes wide with shock. "Sir Cedric." The man gasped. "Is that truly you?" The world shifted again. Who was Sir Cedric? He didn't answer. He didn't know how. The man ran forward, falling to one knee. "God be praised. We thought you perished at Black Hollow. My lord, you've returned from death." He nodded slowly, playing along. The man rose and guided him down the steps into the castle. He was treated like royalty. Guards saluted him. Servants bowed. A young page offered him wine. He touched none of it. Inside his mind, he was screaming. He spent the next hours alone in what they called his chamber. It was filled with armor, scrolls, and maps. A red and gold crested lion with two swords hung above the hearth. He stared at it, wondering what it meant. He found a small diary on a desk. Inside it was a name written over and over again. Cedric Halwyn. So that was who he was now. A knight, a lord, a warrior, except he had no idea how to swing a sword. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. An old man entered, dressed in simple brown robes and carrying a wooden staff. "I heard you'd returned," the man said softly. "I was there when they brought back your sword. It was soaked in blood." The man stared deeply at him. "You don't remember, do you?" He didn't answer. "Sometimes a soul must be reborn. Sometimes a soul must learn what it never did before." The old man stepped closer. "Do not fear this gift, Sir Cedric. Use it." The man left as quietly as he came. That night, Cedric, or the man who had become Cedric, stood by the window. The moon lit the dark hills and forests. He could hear wolves in the distance. He held the sword in his hands. It felt familiar, but also dangerous. Like it held memories his mind had forgotten, but his body still carried. He wasn't dreaming. He knew that now. Somehow, impossibly, he had awakened in another time, in another man's life. He didn't know the rules. He didn't know the people. He didn't know what had brought him here. But he did know one thing. This world, brutal, honest, and raw, was going to test him. And deep inside, under the fear and confusion, a fire had started to burn. The torchlight flickered on the stone walls as Cedric walked silently through the castle corridor. His boots echoed like a drumbeat in a tomb. He had not slept all night. How could he? He had awoken in a stranger's body. Everyone believed he was Sir Cedric Halwyn, a knight of noble blood. They treated him like a hero, but inside, he felt like an actor lost in a stage play he didn't audition for. He barely remembered his real name now. It was slipping like smoke through his fingers. He stepped into the training yard. The cold morning wind bit at his skin, but he welcomed it. It reminded him that he was alive even if this life made no sense. Sir Cedric, a young boy called from across the yard. The boy couldn't have been older than 12. He had freckles and wore a leather tunic far too big for his frame. You asked me to fetch the sword master. He's waiting in the stables. Cedric nodded. Thank you, lad. He almost asked the boy's name, but stopped. Cedric was supposed to know these people. The stables were warm, filled with the smell of hay, horses, and smoke. The sword master waited near the far stall, sharpening a longsword with smooth, steady strokes. He was a tall man with silver hair and arms like tree trunks. His face was marked with old battle scars and sunburn. You've gone soft, the man said without looking up. War doesn't wait for memory to return, my lord. Cedric stepped forward. Then teach me again. The sword master smiled grimly. I hoped you'd say that. What followed was pain pure, punishing pain. They began with stances, then footwork, then heavy wooden swords. Every swing Cedric made was clumsy, every parry late. His arms ached. His back screamed. The sword master struck him again and again. To slow. Whack. No balance. Whack. Your shield is your breath. Hold it or die. By noon, Cedric collapsed, soaked in sweat, arms trembling. He dropped to his knees, breathing like a wild animal. You have forgotten everything, the sword master said, tossing the wooden sword aside. But your hands, they still remember how not to die. That's something. Cedric didn't speak. He only looked at the sky and whispered, Why am I here? Later that evening, a feast was held in the great hall. Long wooden tables were filled with roasted meats, dark ale, and men singing war songs. Candles flickered above like stars. Cedric sat at the high table beside Lord Elric, the ruling noble of the region. Lord Elric was thick-necked and red-faced, a man who laughed loudly and drank even louder. Sir Cedric, you've returned from the grave, Elric boomed, slapping him on the back. We'll need your blade again soon. The northern raiders grow bolder. Blood will spill this winter. Cedric nodded. Then may it not be ours. Elric roared with laughter, still sharp with words. You haven't changed one bit. Cedric looked around the room. Dozens of knights, young squires, noble ladies with sharp eyes. Every face expected something from him. Respect, strength, leadership. He didn't know how to give any of it. His fingers curled under the table. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run, but he forced a smile. Suddenly, the doors slammed open. A soldier stumbled in, face pale, tunic soaked with blood. My lords, he cried. Riders from the north. They raided Thornbridge village. Gasps echoed through the hall. Someone dropped a goblet. How many? Elric demanded, rising to his feet. 30 men on horseback. They burned the fields, took women and children. The villagers are begging for help. Elric turned to Cedric. You still ride with fire in your veins, Sir Cedric. Cedric swallowed. His heart pounded. He had never been in real battle, not in this life, but the eyes of the hall were on him. He stood slowly. I ride at dawn. That night, he stood, alone in the armory, staring at his armor chainmail, steel plates, the lion crest on the chest. Heavy, cold, real. He put it on piece by piece. It felt like donning someone else's skin. A second life, a second soul. As he strapped the sword to his side, a voice spoke behind him. You are not the man who left for Black Hollow. Cedric turned. It was the old man in robes again, the one from the day before. The healer, or wizard, or whatever he was. No, Cedric said, but they need someone, so I'll become him. The old man smiled softly. That is all a hero ever does. Dawn broke over the hills like fire licking the sky. Cedric rode at the head of 20 men. The air was freezing, the grass white with frost. His horse was large and black, armor clinking with each step. He had not slept. He had barely eaten, but something inside him had changed. He was afraid, yes, but beneath the fear was something stronger. A need, a duty. They reached Thornbridge by noon. Smoke rose in the distance. The smell of burning wood and flesh hung in the air. The village was quiet. to quiet. Suddenly, arrows whistled through the air. Ambush. Chaos exploded. Horses screamed. Men fell. Cedric drew his sword without thinking. Time slowed. His first strike was instinct. He blocked a sword with his shield. Spun. Slashed. Blood sprayed his face. A rider came at him. Cedric ducked under the blade and drove his sword through the man's chest. He didn't feel horror. He felt something else. Power. Rage. Focused. Around him, his men rallied. The northern raiders were fierce but scattered. The battle didn't last long, but the fear in Cedric's heart lasted forever. When the dust settled, 13 of his men were dead. The village was still burning. A little girl crawled out from under a wagon, holding a burned doll. Cedric dropped his sword and fell to his knees before her. He took off his helmet. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now." She stared at him with wide, hollow eyes. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek. "You're bleeding," she said. He hadn't noticed. That night, Cedric stood in the ruins of Thornbridge as the villagers buried their dead. He helped carry bodies. He helped dig graves. A woman kissed his hand, sobbing thanks. An old man called him. The lion returned. But inside, Cedric felt none of that. He sat alone under a scorched tree, staring at his blood-stained armor. He was a knight. He was a killer. He was something. In between. And for the first time, he felt like both. The wind howled like a grieving widow outside the castle walls. Rain poured in sheets, soaking the cobblestones and cloaking the sky in shadows. Inside the keep, the air was no warmer. The fires in the hearths couldn't chase away the chill. In Cedric's soul. It had been 3 days since the raid on Thornbridge. 3 days since he spilled blood, not in self-defense, but as a commander. His armor still bore dried streaks of red. He hadn't touched it. He couldn't. He had begun to understand what it meant to wear it, not just physically, but what it did to the heart. The silence that followed a battle was louder than swords. That night, Cedric couldn't sleep. He walked the stone halls alone, candle in hand, each flame flicker chasing shadows up the walls. The castle seemed endless in the dark, its corners deeper, its stairways colder. He passed portraits he didn't recognize, men who wore his face, or nearly his face. The ancestors of Sir Cedric Halwyn, his predecessors, or perhaps versions of himself. He paused in front of one painting, a knight kneeling before a dying child. Behind him, fire and destruction. Below the painting, Cedric the Compassionate. He didn't know what part of that name fit him now. He kept walking. The candle hissed with every breath of wind. Finally, he reached a door at the end of the east wing. It was heavy oak, bound with rusted iron. Dust covered the handle. Something told him he'd been here before, but not in this life. The handle was cold. The door creaked open. Stone stairs led down into darkness. He descended slowly. The steps were uneven, cracked. The air grew damper with every breath. The candle's flame danced like it feared what lay ahead. At the bottom, the passage opened into a crypt. Stone coffins lined the walls. Cobwebs draped over them like ancient veils. Statues of knights stood in corners. Swords pointed downward, their eyes forever shut. It was deathly still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. In the center of the crypt was a circular altar. A sword older than any Cedric had seen was embedded into the stone. Its hilt was wrapped in gold thread. Symbols were etched into the blade, glowing faintly as if whispering secrets through time. Cedric stepped forward, heart pounding. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to it. He reached out and touched the hilt. The crypt shifted. A rush of wind. The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed him whole. And then visions. Flashes of battle. A burning city. Screams. Children crying. Cedric, another Cedric fighting off men in black armor. His sword a blur of fire and steel. Behind him, a woman cried, "Please, save the boy." Then darkness again. Another vision. The same night. Kneeling in blood. Sword broken. A warlord laughed above him. "You chose mercy, and mercy cost you everything." A flash of lightning. Then silence. Cedric gasped and fell backward. The candle relit itself. The crypt was still, but the sword was gone. In its place was a scroll, yellowed and sealed with a crest he recognized from the portraits upstairs. The lion and the crossed swords. With shaking hands, he broke the seal. The scroll was written in Old English, but somehow he understood every word. To the bearer of this blood, know this truth. Cedric Halwyn once made a choice that damned his family for generations. A choice of love over vengeance. of compassion over victory in doing so. He lost the war, but saved the soul of this land. If you read this, the soul of Cedric has returned, not to change the past, but to rewrite the future. There is a secret kept in the crypt beneath Black Hollow. Find it, or history shall repeat itself, and the blood will never stop flowing. Cedric stared at the scroll. His heart pounded in his ears. The crypt beneath Black Hollow. The place. They said he died. The place no one dared return to. The next day, he met with Lord Elric in the war room. The map of the region lay sprawled across the table, red markers showing enemy movement near the border. I want to lead a small party to Black Hollow, Cedric said. Elric raised a brow. Why? That place is cursed. Nothing's left but smoke and ghosts. I need answers, Cedric replied, about who I was and what I left behind. Elric studied him. You're not the same man who once feared that valley. You ride like you've already faced death. I have, Cedric said simply, and I want to meet it properly this time. By evening, 5 men rode with Cedric, quiet, loyal knights who didn't question orders. Among them was the freckled boy from the training yard. He begged to go. Please, sir. I want to see what kind of knight I'll become. Cedric relented. He saw a piece of himself in the boy, young, lost, and brave. They left at dawn, the castle growing smaller behind them. As they rode through misty hills and dark forests, Cedric felt time stretch and bend. Every mile toward Black Hollow felt like a heartbeat closer to truth. They camped near an old watchtower that night. The fire crackled softly as the boy Thomas. His name was shared stories of knights and dragons. Do you think a man can come back different? The boy asked, staring at the stars. Cedric looked at the fire. I think sometimes a man has to die to live better. The boy nodded. Then I hope you came back better, Sir Cedric. Cedric said nothing. He only watched the flames and felt the sword at his side, humming with a secret it hadn't yet told him. They reached Black Hollow on the 3rd day. The ruins stood silent under gray clouds. The ground was blackened. The trees were twisted. The old chapel, once proud, now leaned like a dying man on a crutch. No birds, no wind, only silence. This place isn't cursed, Cedric whispered. It's forgotten. They moved through the rubble. Beneath the chapel, behind a collapsed altar, they found stairs leading downward. He knew the moment he saw them this was it. The second crypt. The others stayed behind. Only Cedric descended. Each step felt like falling through memory. The walls pulsed. The stone glowed faintly. His sword seemed to hum. At the bottom was a single tomb, untouched. On the lid, the name, Cedric Howe in the first. He stepped forward, heart in his throat. Beside the tomb was another scroll and a mirror. He opened the scroll. The future always returns to the place where the past broke. Forgive the sins of the old Cedric, and you will forge a new path. He looked into the mirror. It showed not his face but hundreds of faces. Men, women, children, all suffering, all waiting for him to choose again. Cedric knelt in the silence. He laid the sword at the tomb's feet. I don't know who I was, he whispered, voice breaking, but I know who I want to be now. He lit a candle. And in that small, flickering light, the crypt felt less like a tomb and more like a beginning. The candle in the crypt burned low, casting shadows that danced like memories across the ancient walls. Cedric knelt in silence. He had come searching for answers. What he found was something deeper, something older than the sword, older than his own rebirth. He had seen the face of the first Cedric Howe in the mirror. But more than that, he had seen the weight of his choices, war, mercy, sacrifice. And now, it was his turn. As Cedric rose from the tomb and ascended the cracked stone stairs, his boots echoing through the crypt, he didn't feel like an imposter anymore. He didn't feel like a ghost trapped in a body. He felt chosen. Not by destiny, but by decision. He emerged into the light of the broken chapel. The sky above Black Hollow was overcast, but the storm had not yet come. The ruins were still, waiting. Sir Cedric, a voice called gently. Thomas, the freckled squire with wide eyes and a heart too big for his small frame, stood by the moss-covered altar. His hands were dirty, his tunic soaked in sweat, but his eyes held something new. Respect and trust. I found something, sir, the boy said. Together, they walked behind the chapel where Thomas had discovered a crumbling cellar, hidden beneath a layer of stone and ivy. Inside were old weapons, broken shields, torn banners, all forgotten relics of a forgotten war. But what caught Cedric's attention wasn't the metal or cloth dot, it was a wooden carving. Simple, rough, the figure of a small child holding the hand of a knight. Cedric ran his fingers over the carving. "It's us," Thomas whispered. Cedric nodded. "It could be." The boy's voice grew quieter. "I never knew my father. People say he died fighting for the wrong side. I don't even know if that's true. I was passed around from village to village. No name. Just boy. That's what they called me." Cedric turned to him slowly. "What do you want to be called?" The boy looked at him, uncertain. "I don't know. I thought maybe you could name me." Cedric was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You have fire. You have heart. You stood beside me when grown men would have run. From now on, your name is Rowan." The boy smiled, and, for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Rowan," he said softly, like it was a secret he had waited years to hear. That night, they camped beneath a tree near the ruins. Cedric built the fire himself. Rowan cooked a rabbit he had caught. The stars shimmered above them. Silent and patient as they ate, Cedric handed Rowan a short blade, balanced, clean, but humble. "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a responsibility." Rowan stared at it like it was gold. "I'll earn it," he said. "I promise." Cedric smiled faintly. "I know you will." They sat in silence for a while. Then Rowan asked, "Sir, why did you come back?" Cedric looked into the fire. "I didn't choose to come back," he said, "but I'm choosing to stay." The next morning, they rode west, heading back toward Elric's castle. The forest around them grew denser, quiet, but not in a peaceful way. Cedric slowed his horse. "Something's wrong." A moment later, arrows whistled from the trees. "Ambush!" Cedric threw Rowan from the horse and shielded him with his body. Two of his men fell instantly, pierced through their chests. Black cloaked figures emerged from the trees, mercenaries by their tattoos and jagged weapons. Paid killers, hired blades. Cedric drew his sword and charged. The forest turned into a battlefield. Steel clanged. Horses screamed. Trees trembled with each blow. Cedric fought like a man possessed. Every parry was perfect. Every strike was poetry. His blade danced in the morning light like it remembered its own story. But it wasn't enough. One of the attackers grabbed Rowan by the collar and dragged him back. Cedric turned just in time to see the boy thrown into the mud. "No," he roared. He leapt forward. Blade raised, but a blow from behind sent him crashing to the ground. Blood dripped from his temple. The world spun. Rowan tried to crawl away, but the mercenary raised his sword above the boy. Time stopped. Cedric's fingers found a rock. He hurled it with all his strength. It struck the mercenary's head with a sickening crack. Rowan scrambled back. Cedric rose, eyes filled with fire. He charged in this time. He did not stop. When it was over, the attackers lay broken and breathless. His men were gone. Only Cedric and Rowan remained. The boy rushed to him, tears in his eyes. I was scared. He is Tamered. Cedric dropped to one knee. So was I. He pulled Rowan into a tight embrace. But we're still standing. Rowan buried his face into Cedric's shoulder. "You saved me." Cedric held him tighter. "No, Rowan. You reminded me why I need to be saved." They buried the fallen with what time and strength they had. Atop each grave, Cedric placed a stone. "They died because I took this path," he whispered. Rowan stood beside him. "No, sir. They died because someone wanted to stop you." Cedric looked at the boy. He was right. This was no random attack. Someone didn't want him to return from Black Hollow. Someone feared the truth he was digging up. "Rowan," he said softly, "the first Cedric made a mistake. A choice that hurt many people. I think someone is trying to hide that mistake because if we reveal it, everything changes." Rowan nodded. "Then let's change it." When they returned to the castle, Lord Elric welcomed them with a feast, but Cedric wasn't interested in roasted meat or wine. He walked straight to the war room and unrolled the old maps. Rowan stood at his side, holding the torch. "This symbol," Cedric said, pointing to a faded crest on the corner of the Black Hollow region. "It's not on the new maps, but it was a stronghold once." Rowan leaned in. "Could someone still live there or hide there?" Cedric murmured. A knock echoed through the room. The old man in robes, the one from the crypt, stepped inside. "I see your memory is not just returning," he said. "It's waking." Cedric turned. "Tell me who paid those men." The old man sighed. "Some truths are dangerous, even when wrapped in silence." "I don't care," Cedric said. "The truth matters. The old man studied him, then said, "Look for the raven's crest. When you find it, you'll find the man who wants your name buried." That night, Cedric didn't sleep. He stood at the window while Rowan slept in a chair by the fire. Curled up with a blanket, the wind blew gently through the stone tower. Outside, the land was dark and vast, but in Cedric's heart, something was finally clear. He wasn't just Sir Cedric anymore. He was this Cedric, the one who had chosen compassion over comfort, who named a forgotten boy, who buried the dead with his own hands. The world still saw him as a knight, but maybe, just maybe, he was becoming something more. The bells rang through the castle like a call to war, low and heavy. Their echoes bounced off the stone towers and filled every corner of the land. Birds scattered, horses stirred, and in the war hall, where the flames of justice should have warmed, the wall's cold eyes watched a man be accused of treason. Sir Cedric stood in chains. His armor had been stripped away, his sword taken, his name mocked by whispers now creeping like shadows through the court behind him. Rowan stood tall, defiant, eyes locked on the faces of the gathered lords. "What are the charges?" Cedric asked quietly, though his voice carried the weight of steel. Lord Elric stepped forward, not with pride, not with shame, with a mask hard to read and harder to forgive. "Treason," Elric declared, "desertion and conspiracy with the northern raiders." Gasps erupted in the hall. Some nobles crossed themselves, others looked away, as if watching a ghost rise from a battlefield. Cedric didn't flinch. "You know that's a lie." Elric's eyes narrowed. "I know what was found, Sir Cedric. A northern medallion in your saddle bag, a map of our defenses marked with red ink, and witnesses claim you were seen near the river outposts, where our guards were killed." Rowan stepped forward, fist clenched. "That's not true. He saved lives at Black Hollow. He buried the dead with his own hands." "Elric," Cedric interrupted calmly, "you knew me. You rode beside me. If I am truly guilty, why bring this to trial and not to blade?" Elric paused. A flicker of doubt flashed in his eyes. "Because," he said at last, "some men deserve the chance to explain before they hang." The trial was set at dawn, a public one by order of the court. It would be judged not only by nobles, but also by the people, the very people Cedric had protected, the villagers, the blacksmiths, the widows of war. And yet, his enemies had prepared in the days before the trial. Rumors spread like wildfire that Cedric was not the real knight, that he had returned changed, possessed by spirits, that he had secret meetings with cloaked men, that Rowan was not his squire but his spy. "They want to erase you," Rowan said bitterly as they sat in the dungeon cell together, "because you're asking the questions they buried years ago." Cedric stared at the flickering torchlight on the wall. "This isn't about me. It's about a secret someone's willing to kill for." Rowan leaned closer. "Then we need to bring it into the light." On the day of the trial, the courtyard was filled. Rain clouds gathered above, but held back as if the sky itself wanted to watch. Cedric stood tall, dressed not as a knight, but as a man. His wrists were bound with rope, though he carried no shame. His head was unbowed. Lord Elric stood at the high table, flanked by nobles. Behind him, the town crier read the charges aloud. When he finished, Elric spoke. "You may speak in your defense." Cedric stepped forward, scanning the crowd. He saw villagers from Thornbridge, the cook's daughter who once bowed when he passed, the blacksmith who repaired his saddle. He saw fear, confusion, and hope. "I am not the same man who left this land months ago," Cedric said. "You all know it. I know it. But the blood on my hands is not betrayal. It is the mark of battle, the kind that protects, not destroys." He paused. "Someone planted evidence. Someone who fears the truth I found at Black Hollow. And that truth lies in the raven's crest." Murmurs broke out. Elric banged his staff. Silence. But then a noble woman stood. "Lady Arwen, the steward of Thornbridge. I saw him bury the children with his bare hands," she said. "He wept for strangers. What kind of traitor weeps for children not his own?" Others began to murmur in agreement. Then Rowan walked forward. The guards moved to stop him, but Cedric raised a hand. "Let him speak." Rowan climbed onto a wooden box so all could see him. "I have no family, no name, until this man gave me one. He named me Rowan, and in that name, I found courage. If he is guilty, then hang me too." The courtyard went still. Cedric's eyes burned, but he did not let a tear fall. Suddenly, a voice rang out. "Wait." The crowd parted as the old man in robes stepped forward, in his hands an iron-bound chest. He placed it on the table, opened it, and pulled out scrolls, documents, letters. These are the true records from the archives of Howwin, he said. They speak of deals made in secret, of a noble family once sitting in this court who sold out Black Hollow for gold. Cedric Howwin discovered their betrayal, and they tried to bury him for it. Gasps turned to shouts. One of the nobles turned pale. Elric grabbed a scroll. Regis Sealand paled himself. Then, slowly, he looked at Cedric. I didn't know. I believe you, Cedric said. But now, you do. The trial ended not with a sword, but a silence. A rope was cut, not tied. Cedric was freed. Rowan was named his official squire by vote of the court, and the noble who betrayed Black Hollow. He fled the same night, under shadow. His lands were seized, his banners burned. But for Cedric, the cost still lingered in the dungeons, in the mud. In the eyes of people who had doubted him, he didn't hate them. He pitied the world that had learned to fear truth more than lies. That night, Cedric stood alone in the courtyard. The stars were bright. The wind carried the scent of autumn leaves. Rowan approached, holding something behind his back. What is it? Cedric asked. Rowan grinned and revealed it, a banner, a new one, red and gold. But instead of a line, it bore the hands clasped together, one armored, one bare. Cedric took it. It's not the past, Rowan said. It's what comes next. Cedric nodded slowly. Not a knight of war, not a ghost of legend, but a man, ready to build something new. Rain fell in soft sheets as the gallows creaked above the village square. Cedric watched from the stone steps of the council hall, the hood of his cloak pulled low. The square was mostly empty. Only the wind moved freely now, tugging at forgotten banners and wet cloaks. Beneath the wooden platform, a girl sat in chains, barefoot, bruised, and silent. She looked no older than 18. Her dark hair clung to her face, soaked by the rain. Her dress was torn, her wrists raw from rope, but it was her eyes, silent and burning, that struck Cedric like an arrow to the heart. She looked at no one except him. It had been 3 weeks since Cedric's trial. 3 weeks since the truth saved him and exposed others. Rowan now trained, daily in the yard, learning sword and shield. The banner of clasped hands had been raised across Howwin's lands, symbolizing justice and unity. The people were healing, but darkness wasn't done. Elric summoned Cedric that morning. There's a girl, accused of stealing state records, spy for the Raven's Crest, they claim. She won't speak, not even to save herself. Cedric frowned. What proof? None. Only a guard who swears she was caught in the tower. And who benefits from silencing her? Elric sighed. That's why I called you. Now, Cedric stood beneath the gallows as the girl sat unmoving, chained to a post. She should have looked broken, but she didn't. She looked dangerous. He stepped forward. The guard shifted, uncertain. She's to hang at dawn, one said nervously. Cedric removed his cloak and handed it to Rowan. Not yet. Give me 5 minutes. The guard hesitated, then nodded. Cedric knelt before the girl. You have one chance to speak, he said. Why were you in the tower? She looked up slowly. Her eyes were green, but not soft. They burned like lanterns in a storm. I wasn't stealing, she whispered. I was returning something. Cedric narrowed his eyes. What? She glanced at the guards, then back at him. A letter from your mother. The world seemed to tilt. Cedric froze. My mother. She wrote it when you vanished. Someone intercepted it. I found it sealed and hidden. I read it. I knew you were different from the stories. I wanted to give it back. Why? Because the truth matters, she said, even if it kills me. That night, Cedric had her brought to the old chapel, the only place still quiet enough for secrets. Her name was Mira, an orphan, a healer's apprentice. She had lived most of her life under the rule of Baron Kale the Noble, who had fled after Cedric's trial. It was Kale who ordered her silence, Kale who had hunted her across the realm, Kale who had sworn her dead when she ran, and Kale was the true heart of the Raven's Crest. He used my family, Mira whispered, told us. We were serving the kingdom. We were pawns. When I found the truth, he tried to erase me. She handed Cedric a damp, crumpled letter. It was written in a delicate, familiar hand. My son, if you are reading this, it means fate has not abandoned us. You were born with a fire stronger than your father's blade, but kindness lives in your hands, not just strength. I pray you live not as a knight, but as a man who chooses mercy over power. You are more than steel. You are the promise of a better future." Cedric's hands trembled. He had not heard his mother's voice in years. Now, through ink and rain, it called him back to himself. He rose slowly. "You'll stay here, protected." Mira stood. "You don't need to protect me. You need to fight with me." Double quote. Cedric turned. "Why?" "Because you're not the only one who came back from the dead." In the days that followed, Mira proved herself. She knew the inner roads, the hidden paths used by Kel's messengers. She carried maps stolen from Kel's courier chambers. She even knew the secret symbols carved into stone posts' messages, used by the Raven's crest. One night, Cedric brought her to the tower library. Together with Rowan, they laid the pieces out. Kel hadn't vanished. He was rebuilding his army in the ruins of Greystone Hollow, an abandoned fortress in the east. "He plans to strike before winter," Mira said. "He wants to break Hellwind while it's still healing." Rowan leaned over the map. "Then we strike first." Cedric looked at them, one a boy he named, the other a girl who returned the voice of his past. And for the first time, he didn't feel alone. That night, Cedric and Mira stood on the tower balcony. The wind carried the scent of rain and earth. "Do you believe we can win?" she asked. He looked out at the torches burning along the castle walls. "I don't know, but I believe in why we have to try." Mira stepped closer. "I spent years hiding from truth, but you walked into fire to find it." "I walked into fire because I was tired of living in the dark," Cedric said. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Mira whispered, "My name was never meant to be Mira." He turned. "It means shadow," she said. "Kel gave it to me to keep me quiet, but I want to choose again." Cedric smiled gently. "Then what will you be?" She looked at him, and in that moment, he saw not a girl beneath the gallows, but a woman standing on the edge of revolution. "Call me Alira," she said. Cedric nodded. "Alira it is." The next morning, Cedric summoned his allies. Elric gave his blessing. Rowan brought the scouts. Alira traced the routes. And by nightfall, a banner of red and gold marched east toward Greystone Hollow, toward Kel, toward war. The valley of Ashvale lay silent under the morning mist. Birdsong had stopped. Even the wind held its breath. In the distance, black banners rose above the ruined walls of Greystone Hollow. The ancient keep now crawling with Kel's men. Cedric stood on a cliff overlooking it all, armor gleaming faintly under his red and gold cloak. Behind him, 200 fighters waited, farmers, blacksmiths, a few trained knights, and many who had never held swords until a week ago. Beside him stood Alira, a map unrolled between them, her brow furrowed, hair tied tight in a warrior's. Now Rowan was already in the trees, crouched with the scouts, blade steady in his hand. "This isn't just a battle," Alira whispered. "It's a reckoning." Cedric nodded. "Let's make it one worth remembering." 2 days earlier, their small army had camped near the forest edge. Cedric had walked the line of tents in the dark, speaking to the men and women, listening to their fears, their stories. One was a baker who had lost her brother to Kel's tax raids. One was a boy who never spoke, but carved birds into wood and handed one to Cedric without a word. Another was a woman named Brunna, who once served as Kel's stable master, now ready to bring fire to his gates. They weren't soldiers, they were survivors. And Cedric knew that was more powerful than fear. Alira had studied the terrain for weeks. The keep was surrounded by cliffs and narrow paths. One road led straight to the gates, but Kel would expect that. The old tunnels beneath the keep, the same ones Kel had used to smuggle gold. And silence would be their key. "If we split the force," Alira explained, "you can draw them out at the front. I'll take 20 through the tunnels and break the gate from within." Cedric hesitated. "It's dangerous. You could be trapped." Alira met his eyes. "I've lived in shadows all my life. I know how to move inside them." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then go with fire in your heart." She smiled. "You named me Alira. I plan to live up to it." The plan was set. On the morning of battle, Cedric rode to the front lines. His armor bore the symbol of the clasped hands. His sword, once the blade of a ghost, was now his own. And his voice rang clear across the valley. "Today is not about banners. It's not about bloodlines or thrones. It's about what we choose to stand for." The crowd listened. "Kel believes we are weak. That truth can be buried. That fear wins. But we are more than what he sees. We are the fire that rises from ruin." Rowan raised his blade. "For Hellwind," others joined. "For Hellwind, for truth, for Cedric." and with that, they charged. The battle began with fire. Kell's archers rained arrows down from the tower's shields raised. Cedric's front line held firm. The clash of steel against steel echoed through the valley. War cries filled the air. Cedric moved through the chaos like a storm, parrying, striking, protecting. But he wasn't everywhere. A group of his fighters fell near the south wall. Rowan, seeing the breach, ran to cover it. He wasn't meant to fight alone, but he didn't hesitate. 3 raiders circled him. He blocked the first, ducked the second, but the third slammed him to the ground. Before the blade came down, a dagger flew through the air and struck the attacker's throat. Alira, breathless and bleeding from a gash on her side, had emerged from the tunnels early. The gates opened. She gasped. Kell's inside the throne chamber. Cedric grabbed her hand. "You did it." "No," she said, eyes on Rowan. "He did, inside Greystone Hollow." The air was thick with smoke and iron. Cedric, Alira, and Rowan stormed the main hall. There, standing beneath the Raven's Crest banner, sword drawn, was Cale, older than Cedric remembered, crueler. "You were supposed to stay dead," Cale sneered. "You were supposed to stay buried," Cedric replied. Cale smiled coldly. "You bring orphans and villagers to fight me. You think you built a kingdom. You built a dream and dreams break." Cedric raised his sword. "Then let me show you what a dream looks like when it fights back." The duel was brutal. Cale was a master swordsman. Every blow struck like thunder. Cedric blocked, dodged, parried. Blood ran down his arms. Sweat blurred his vision. But he didn't fall. Every time Cale mocked him, Cedric remembered the faces of Thornbridge, the hands that gave him bread, the children who waved at him in the street, the girl beneath the gallows, the boy who called himself Rowan, and with a roar, Cedric disarmed Cale. The sword clattered to the floor. Cale fell to his knees. "It's over," Cedric said. "Then kill me." Cedric raised his blade. Then, "Stop." "No," he said. "Death is too easy for you. You'll stand trial. You'll face the truth." Cale spat. "You think mercy makes you strong?" Cedric sheathed his sword. "No, it makes me free." The battle was won. Ashvale Keep stood under new banners. The people of the valley gathered for a ceremony days later. Cedric stood before them not as a king, not as a warlord, but as a man. "I was once lost," he said. "I woke up in a life I didn't understand. I thought strength came from power, but it comes from people, from stories, from names." He turned to Rowan. "This boy became my squire when I had nothing." He turned to Alira. "This girl gave me back my past and helped me shape our future." And then, holding up the clasped hands banner, he said, "This is our land now, not mine, ours." That night, as torches lit the sky and songs echoed through the keep, Cedric sat with Alira and Rowan by a quiet fire. "What now?" Rowan asked. Cedric looked at them both. "Now we build, and if more enemies come," Alira leaned forward, "then we stand together." Cedric smiled, leaning back as stars filled the sky. He had awoken once as a forgotten knight, but now he was remembered, and more importantly, he remembered who he had chosen to become. Ashvale Keep stood tall under golden banners. Weeks had passed since the fall of Cale. The people had begun to rebuild stone by stone, home by home. Laughter returned to the markets. Children chased one another through the fields. Blacksmiths hammered in rhythm, and the smell of fresh bread floated through the streets. Cedric had done what many believed impossible. He united the broken. But as the land healed, a summons came, sealed in wax, carried by royal guard, by order of His Majesty, King Ulrich of the crowned throne. Lord Cedric Halwyn is summoned to the capital of Veldenhold for audience and recognition. Attend without delay. The royal guard stood silent outside Ashvale's gate, armored in black and gold. Cedric met them with calm dignity. Rowan stood beside him, blade at his hip. Alira watched from the steps of the keep, her expression unreadable. "They came with 10 men, she said. "That's not an invitation. That's a message." Cedric nodded. "The king wants to remind us who sits on the throne." Rowan frowned. "Are you going?" Cedric looked out toward the horizon. "If we want to change the kingdom, we must face the one who rules it." He touched Rowan's shoulder. "Watch over Ashvale. If I don't return," Rowan's voice cracked. "You'll return." Alira stepped forward. "Take this." She handed him a small scroll. Wrapped in red ribbon, it holds the words of the people, their stories. "Read it when you feel surrounded." Cedric held her gaze. "You once walked in shadows. Now you light the way." Then, with sword and silence, he rode east. The capital of Veldenhold was no place of warmth. High towers pierced the clouds, walls of stone and gold stretched for miles. But the streets told a different story. Beggars sleeping under crumbling arches, children with hollow eyes, nobles laughing from carriages that never stopped. Cedric rode past them all. When he reached the palace gates, the guards saluted him. Inside, marble floors gleamed like ice. Statues of kings lined the halls, each larger than life, each holding swords raised high. Not one held a child, not one smiled. The throne room was vast and cold. Red carpets stretched like rivers of blood. At the far end sat King Ulrich, a tall man with gray-streaked hair, sharp blue eyes, and a robe heavy with jewels. "Cedric, how win?" the king said, voice deep and smooth. The ghost turned rebel turn. "Savior?" Cedric bowed politely, "Only a man trying to do what's right." The king chuckled. "Right is a matter of perspective." They walked together through the palace gardens. "You've made quite the name for yourself," the king said, "unifying outlands, toppling traitors. A pity you didn't bring the rebellion here to me." "I didn't come to rebel," Cedric said. "I came to remind." "Remind me of what?" "That the crown was meant to serve the people, not weigh them down." The king stopped walking. "You sound like a romantic," he said. "And I find romantics dangerous." Cedric didn't flinch. "I find forgetting your people more dangerous." King Ulrich stared at him for a long moment, then smiled coldly. "I should have had you hanged when you returned from Black Hollow." "Why didn't you?" "Because the people love you now," the king said, "and I love staying in power." That night, Cedric was given chambers in the West Wing. They were lavish gold-framed mirrors, feathered pillows, meat and wine on silver trays. But Cedric touched none of it. Instead, he opened the scroll Alira had given him. Inside were dozens of notes handwritten by people of Ashvale. "Thank you for saving our home. Because of you, my daughter sleeps safe. We were forgotten. You remembered us." Cedric sat down, the weight of their trust pressing against his chest. He could feel the palace's quiet threat all around him. He had seen this kind of rule before, elegant cruelty, and now he had to decide about it, or challenge it. The next morning, he was brought to the council chamber. Nobles sat in a half-circle, velvet robes and jeweled rings flashing under torchlight. The king sat at the center, watching like a hawk. "We reviewed the situation. In Ashvale," a noble began, "it seems peace has returned. The lands are fertile. The people, content, which is dangerous," another added. "Content people think freely." Cedric remained still. The king leaned forward. "We have a proposal, Cedric. Join the royal circle. Become a duke. Let your banners fly beside ours, and let us send governors to help you." "In exchange for what?" Cedric asked. "Loyalty," the king said, and silence. Cedric smiled faintly. "You fear what I might say?" "No," the king replied. "I fear what others will believe." Cedric stood. "I don't need a throne," he said. "I need a kingdom worth protecting. And if I say no," the king asked, "then the people will still follow me." Cedric answered, "Because I ride with truth, not gold." The king's smile vanished. That night, guards entered Cedric's chamber. He was ready, with Alira's scroll hidden inside his cloak and his sword at his hip. He disarmed the first, knocked the second unconscious, and vanished into the night. He escaped through servant halls, over castle walls, across moonlit streets, and through the eastern gates where a blacksmith named Garin, who once lived in Ashvale, hid him in a cart of hay. He rode hidden for days, moving only at night, until finally the hills of home came into view. Ashvale. Rowan was the first to see him. "Alira," the boy shouted. "He's back! He's back!" She came running, eyes wide, breath caught in her throat. "You made it," she whispered. "They offered me gold," Cedric said. "Did you take it?" He pulled out the scroll. "I brought this instead." That evening, Cedric stood again before his people. "I met the king," he said. "He wears a crown, but forgets why it shines. He offers titles to silence truth. He gives nothing without taking more." The crowd stood still. "But we are not here to kneel. We are here to rise." He looked at them, faces marked by work, hearts shaped by struggle. "We don't need a throne. We need each other." They erupted in cheers. And far away, in a cold palace, a king watched flames rise over Ashvale in the distance. He didn't smile. He understood now. A man with no need for gold was a man he could never control. The wind was colder beyond Ashvale. Not harsh, not cruel, but patient, like an old man breathing slowly beneath a mountain. It rustled the golden grass and whispered through broken stones that had once been towers, walls, and gates. Cedric stood at the edge of the map, the part where old ink faded into uncertainty, and he rode beyond it. He left Asheville quietly. No fanfare, no banners, just a note left with Rowan and Alira. The kingdom's wounds are deeper than gold and steel. I must ride further where names were lost, but people remain. He didn't take many supplies, just a sword, the clasped hands banner, and the scroll of letters Alira had once given him. He carried them like a compass, not for direction but for memory. The outer regions of the kingdom were lands most half forgotten, lands the crown had ignored for generations. Here, roads were broken, bridges collapsed, villages spoke in old tongues and lived by old rules. But Cedric rode not as a conqueror. He rode as a listener. In a village built on stones and sorrow, he sat with a woman who hadn't seen a night in 20 years. She touched his armor like it was a ghost. "You speak gently," she said, "but your eyes hold fire." In a mountain pass, a blind boy held his hand and whispered, "You carry a light that doesn't burn." And in the forest of Hollowmere, where no banners flew and no crown had ever ruled, he met a man with silver eyes and a voice like thunder. The man's name was Orlen. He was tall, ancient, perhaps. He wore no armor, only robes of earth-toned fabric. He carried no blade, but the air around him felt heavier, as if time itself bowed to his steps. "You are the one who was forgotten," Orlen said. Cedric raised an eyebrow. "I've heard that before, but you returned," Orlen added, "and still chose to serve." Cedric stepped forward. "You speak like you've been waiting for me." "I've been waiting for what you represent," Orlen said. He led Cedric through the woods, deeper than any path. At last, they reached a stone archway covered in ivy. Beneath it, a hidden temple carved into a hill. Inside, paintings danced along the walls, lit by natural light through cracks in the roof. Ancient symbols, battles, fire, swords, crowns shattered, hands reaching toward each other. One image stopped Cedric's breath. It was him, or someone who looked exactly like him. A knight standing between the armies, no crown on his head but a child in his arms. "What is this?" he whispered. Orlen stood beside him. "A prophecy." The prophecy, Orlen explained, had been passed down through stories not written by kings, but spoken by firelight in forgotten places. It told of a kingdom broken by greed, of a king so proud he deafened himself to cries, of a knight who was not born of nobility, but chosen by time to remind the people of what a kingdom should be, not built by rule, Orlen said, but by choice. Cedric sat before the mural. "For a long time, I never asked for this. No one ever does," Orlen replied. "But the weight finds the one who can carry it." Cedric looked down at his hands, scarred, calloused, strong. "I don't want to rule." "You won't," Orlen said. "You'll ignite." For weeks, Cedric wandered from village to village, valley to valley. He shared food. He helped rebuild walls. He listened to old stories. And slowly, people began to follow, not with swords, but with song. Farmers, mothers, orphans, old warriors, who once left the battlefield in shame. They called him the Wandering Knight, but he felt no pride in it. He only felt a promise growing in his chest. One night, a fire crackled beneath a starlit sky. A girl with braids sat beside Cedric and asked, "Why do you ride alone?" Cedric thought for a long time before answering. "Because the world needs to remember that even alone we can stand for something." She handed him a red flower. "Then take this, so you remember me too." He did. And he pressed it into the book of letters. At the edge of the world where the cliffs dropped into endless sea, Cedric stood with the banner in his hand, not waving it, but simply holding it. Behind him, 200 people had gathered, not because he asked, because they believed. He turned to face them. "I cannot give you gold," he said. "I cannot offer titles." He raised the banner. "But I can promise you this. I will never forget you." They cheered, but Cedric didn't smile. Instead, he looked east toward the capital, toward the king, and he knew what came next. Back in Asheville, Rowan trained daily. Alira studied the movements of the Capitol Guard. When Cedric's raven returned with a letter, Alira read it aloud. "Gather everyone. The kingdom is listening again. It's time to speak louder." Rowan looked up. "He's coming back." Alira nodded. "Not just him," she whispered. "The world he carries." The sun rose slowly over the eastern hills, washing the stone of Ashvale Keep in soft gold. But it wasn't just the light that woke the people. It was the sound of footsteps. Thousands, not marching in anger, not roaring in rebellion, but walking together, from villages and ruins, from forests and farmlands, from corners of the kingdom forgotten by kings they came. Children on shoulders, mothers with baskets, blacksmiths with hammer-marked hands, healers, orphans, soldiers with rusted swords strapped to their backs, all walking toward one place, toward one man. Cedric returned at dawn. He rode through Ashvale's gates, not with guards but with Rowan and a Lyra by his side. He wore no crown, only armor, weathered by time, with a red cloak draped across his shoulders, the clasped hand sigil stitched near his heart. He looked older now, not in years, but in presence, as if the world had whispered secrets into his bones and he had chosen to carry them. He dismounted slowly and looked around at what had risen in his absence. Ashvale had changed, not with gold, but with meaning. Walls had been painted with vines and stories. Children practiced sword drills with wooden sticks beneath the flag of unity, and the people stood waiting not to be ruled, but to be seen. A raven flew in from the capital, a message tied to its leg. Elira read it aloud in the courtyard. By order of King Ulrich, Lord Cedric Halwyn is hereby charged with sedition, and is to present himself before the royal court within 3 days. Rowan muttered, "They're scared." Cedric nodded, "And fear makes rulers foolish." He turned to the crowd. "I will go," he said, "but not alone." 3 days later, the gates of Veldenhold opened to a sight no one had expected. Cedric entered not with an army but with the people. They filled the streets in silence. They carried no blades, only letters. Scrolls. Wooden carvings, painted stones, with names of lost family members, and they carried one banner red and gold, stitched by dozens of hands. Not a lion, not a crown, but hands clasped. The palace guards didn't know what to do. There were no enemies, only unity. The nobles watched from balconies, faces pale. King Ulrich sat on the throne, expression unreadable, as Cedric stepped into the great hall, with Rowan and Lyra behind him. "You defy the crown," the king said softly. Cedric stepped forward. "I carry no crown to defy." The king's voice rose. "You lead a rebellion." "No," Cedric said. "I lead a memory, one the people refuse to forget." He unrolled a scroll of Lyra's original. "This is what your kingdom looks like. Children who were left to starve. Villages burned for gold. Wives whose husbands vanished under shadowed banners." He stepped closer. "I am not here to steal your throne. I am here to remind you why it exists." The room was silent. Then Rowan stepped forward. He held up a wooden bird. "I carved this when I thought I'd die with no name," he said. "But he gave me one, and in that name, I found courage." Lyra spoke next. "I was bound to silence," she said, "until he listened. Now I speak for hundreds who can't." A noble stood suddenly, then another, then a servant, then a captain of the guard. Each raised a hand, some in salute, some in support, but all in belief. The king looked around his hall, once silent, now swelling with voices. He saw that the power he held was no longer fear. It was memory. And memory had moved on. "I cannot stop you," he whispered. Cedric shook his head. "You never could, because I never ruled. I only walked." That night, Cedric didn't stay in the palace. He returned to the people gathered in the streets. They offered him the throne. He declined it. "You do not need a king," he told them. "You need each other." Instead, he helped light torches. He helped build schools. He helped raise flags in towns that had never known one. He sat beside old women and heard their stories. He rode with lost boys and gave them names. He carved benches under trees. He listened. Years passed. Cedric never built a castle. He built something deeper, a circle of voices, a place where leaders were chosen by heart, not heritage. Rowan became a teacher, Lyra a keeper of stories, and Cedric, he became the road others followed, even when he was gone. When he died, they buried him beneath a tree at Ashvale. No tomb. No statue, just a stone, with these words: "Here lies the man who listened, the knight who remembered," a name carved, not in stone but in time.